아까 시간이 없을까 봐 질문도 안 하고.
So actually, I was hoping to have enough time, so I did not ask any questions, but I ended up not having a lot of time. So anyway, Dr. Messing had talked about actually a system of producing knowledge regarding gender, labor, and health. And so you talked about how there is a tension between trying to reach OSH versus the gender equality, and I think that goes the same for Korea as well. So this is quite universal because you have the traditional patriarchy and the gender discrimination, capitalism all coming together, and so it's very entrenched. So it's not easy to find a solution to the issue, but nonetheless, problematizing it and raising the issue are quite different, I think, in the two countries. I'm sure everyone here will agree with me that Korean universities do not forge a partnership with trade unions or the communities, and we don't have that. Basically, it's like just something. It's like a unicorn in our imagination. And so that's why individual researchers, especially those who have been engaged in student movement in the 1980s and 90s, form the informal network among colleagues. And today's symposium, I think, is in line with that kind of networking of individual researchers. But we don't really have that kind of student movement anymore, neither the production of progressively mind researchers. And so in that sense, the reproduction of knowledge is losing its foundation, so to speak. So the Korean universities are not going to change overnight. So having said that, what are we going to do? So one alternative, I think, is that we can and continue with forging voluntary platforms of researchers and academic organizations, but it has to be sustainable. And so the network does need financing to be able to perform the research. So perhaps maybe we can get some sustainable funding from industrial trade unions, or larger trade unions, or other foundations. And the second thing is that although rather still minimal in Korea, we do have some gender or sex-based analysis that are taking place. And so there are many governmental projects actually that are coming out that require a gender impact assessment or a GBA. And so I think the researchers who would like to focus on gender and health can also get involved. Dr. Laberge and Chatini have also mentioned about the need to train the trainers. Students and the teenagers also are working in a very dire situation in Korea. So in Korea, their rather educational level is low, they're unskilled, there can be exclusion from labor market, and they're prone to industrial accidents. In Korea, students feel that basically going to university is given priority. And so students who don't go to university and opt to get a job or go get vocational training are just basically deemed invisible in Korean society. It's only when they run into an accident and something really bad happens to them that people pay attention. So there was a mention of this high schooler. So he actually was not trained to do diving, but he actually had diving equipment and he had to clean the bottom of a boat, and he was not certified as diving. Diving was not even in the job description or in the apprenticeship, and he's supposed to have a partner, but he was working alone, but he died cleaning the bottom of the boat. There was this another high school student. He was actually majoring or studying horticulture, but he was given the job of operating a forklift, and then it was broken, and so he was fixing the forklift, but then he got stuck and he died. And there was a really famous case. In the case of this girl, she was actually studying to become a pet carer, but she was allocated in a call center. And in the call center, there is this particular team that is deemed to be particularly difficult, and the suicide rate is rather high. So, in other words, it's a team that is in charge with preventing people unsubscribing from the service. So she has to retain the customers, but then she couldn't fulfill her target, and she was in a lot of stress, and she eventually committed suicide. These students are not guaranteed by the labor law, but nonetheless, there was a high call for the workers' compensation to be covered to these students, and also the OSH law to be extended to these students. And also in 2019, the system of having a labor attorneys allocated to the schools was adopted, but the schools. So I hope that you didn't turn off the slide because I'm running out of time. But anyway, but then the schools became a little bit desperate that their employment rate would go down, and so their negotiating power was rather weak. And so OSH basically was brought down to the lower levels of the priority. And the students themselves, they don't have any education regarding OSH, neither about the basics of labor human rights. In 2022, my organization, the Solidarity for Workers' Health, got some funding, and we started a project regarding the rehabilitation of young female workers who had undergone occupational injury. So we have young, unskilled women workers. They are working in the small to medium enterprises that is not unionized. And because they're young, they are prone to sexual harassment and violence. And I was really surprised when I was doing the research and survey, because these young women were cooking for the other fellow workers in their workplaces. But a lot of them sometimes have to be the breadwinners in the family. They're from poor, lower income backgrounds. They're not supported by the family. They're really alone. And so their negotiating power in the labor market is really, really low. And they can't even mention anything about occupational safety or health. And there is no system of paid sick leaves or injury benefits for these kind of workers. And so anyway, we got applications from about 50 to 60 workers. And a majority of them were actually suffering from mental illnesses like depression. So all of them were in a really dire situation. So one question, though, is that you have the major stakeholders in Quebec, and you said that you are educating the teachers and other stakeholders. But then there's the enforcement side, I think. There is also the power inequality. There must be mechanisms in and outside the workplace to enforce all of these policies and schemes. What's the support and what's the regulation that enables the enforcement of this kind of the trainer or training of the teachers? So if you can elaborate about that point, it'll be very helpful. Thank you.